All right, we're back here to actually get the pattern onto this piece of buckskin leather. This buckskin was off the buck I killed 2 years ago. Maybe someday we'll do a tanning video. Brand tanning leather is a humongous pain in the rear, and this buck was real old and his skin is super tough. So, you know, out here on the edges, well, and there's a couple spots in this hide where I got it nice and soft, and I have some smaller hides upstairs that are real soft too, but I saved this hide in particular for making holsters and knife sheaths out of, because the skin is so thick and tough, especially down the spine on this buck, that it's great for this. But we're just gonna pick a spot here on this giant piece of leather where I have a nice flat area. And so we're gonna take our pattern that we made in the last video, and all I did was actually cut out about a 1/2 inch piece of the pattern right along the edge here, cut it off the remaining piece of paper, and this is the pattern for our welt. So we'll cut that out too while we're doing this. But all I'm gonna do is wrestle this hide and get this pattern on here such that I waste as little of the hide as possible. And then we'll take a carpenter's pencil with a decently sharp tip. Hold on, let me check the camera here, make sure you scoot it over here. Take a carpenter's pencil with a decently sharp tip, and then we're gonna hold the pattern down and mark out the edges to be cut. Now it's important that you could probably stick this down to this hide with like some spray adhesive or something, but I just try to hold it in place and keep it from flopping around. Don't move the pattern around if you have to shift where your hands are at. Keep the pattern in the same position so that you don't alter the outline you're trying to transfer over to the piece of buckskin. A lot of times I'll have my wife, oops, see, I just moved it. Let me get this line back up. A lot of times I'll have my wife trace the outline while I use both hands to hold things down, so that I make sure I don't have any mishaps with moving the pattern around on myself here. Okay, there we go. But today, she's not home. She's still at work. So I'm doing it myself, which is fine. I enjoy being down here in the quiet in my basement, especially when it's like at least a little bit clean. You guys that work in a workshop a lot know that you get projects going and then you end up with a mess, and it's not the most fun job. You want to get on to the next project, not spend a couple days cleaning up your junk in your basement. So there it is. So okay, so there we have our pattern transferred onto this heavy piece of buckskin, and now you could try to use a pair of scissors like this to cut it. I actually use a pair of tin snips. I just call it the big scissors, these guys. And we'll cut him out. It's gonna be hard for me to film because my field of view is really small on the camera, but we'll do the best we can here. I'm gonna come at it from the bottom. You see that? Yeah, you can see it for the most part. Come at it from the bottom here and cut right on that line. So if I had to give this buckskin in particular a weight, like when you buy leather, you buy it 3 ounce, 6 ounce, 10 ounce, whatever. If I had to give this buckskin a weight, I would say this is probably around a 5 ounce piece of leather. So not super thick, but it's really stiff in comparison to a vegetable tanned leather. This is brain tanned. Like I said, we'll get into that some other day if we decide that we want to. I have a hide out in the shed that's actually here. Let's see if we can get around this corner with these smaller scissors. I have a hideout in the garage or in the shed that's there we go. It's still just rawhide, and maybe we'll tan that guy. I kind of been saving that rawhide for bowstrings or whatever, dog treats at the worst. Okay, I'm just gonna lop off this piece right here because it's really irregular, and we'll use this irregular piece to make the welt. And why do I keep saying welt? No, welt's the right term. Yeah, welt. I keep getting welt and gusset confused in my head. Well, we'll take this irregular piece here, and we'll use him to cut the welt out of. See, right there, and that'll lay perfectly in. Bleep. The outline of the sheath. Now, so sorry, I'm fighting this thing while you guys are watching, but you gotta take your time a little bit, or else you end up with a mess. Let's see here. Cutting leather is not the best thing to use is just a razor sharp knife. But this is not perfectly flat, and if it were, then that's what I would use. I would take this. This is another homemade knife. I'd take this guy, which is stupid razor sharp, and I would just cut the outline out. But since this hide doesn't want to lay flat, I usually use scissors. And it's okay that the edge is irregular. You know, if you're doing this and your edge gets a little irregular on you, that's fine. You can come back with a flap disc later, which we'll do, or some kind of sander. I usually just use a flap disc on my angle grinder, and yeah, you come back clean up with that. It'll take you nothing but a minute. Okay, there. So that's cut out. We can take this big piece of hide. Now, if you got any buckskin around your house and you got a dog, you make sure you put it up, because that dog will eat that hide. My coonhound would eat that whole hide in a day. Okay, so there we got that guy. Now we can, just gonna get an eyeball this welt here. Make sure I got enough material, which I most certainly do. Okay, so now the welt doesn't have to be cut perfectly to the shape of the pattern. I just cut that out to show you guys. Like if you had a huge piece of leather or a bunch of scrap pieces, and needed to use, you know, a weird scrap piece like this to try to get your welt pattern onto, you can, but you also can just take the piece you just cut out and it'll fit perfectly inside there. So I'll just cut that guy off of here. Just use the pattern to check and make sure that I have enough material as far as width goes, which I do. So I'll just cut him off of here, about a 1/2 inch wide, and then we'll glue it where we want it on the sheath, and then if there's any ragged edge, we'll just use the flap disc to clean it up later on. The important thing is for the welt is so that when you're putting the blade in and out, your blade should never contact any stitching. It should be rubbing against the welt. See, we can contact cement him right down in here. Take this pattern. It'll give me a real good idea of where to apply my contact cement. Okay, so that's the basics of the pattern making. Now what we're going to do is we're going to contact cement, and we're going to mark out on the edges of this pattern here where we want to apply the contact cement. So we get the contact cement applied to the welt and to the pieces of the holster, or I keep saying holster too, pieces of the sheath here, and then once it tacks up, follow the directions on the type of contact cement you're using. All we got to do is get this baby folded over on itself, let that contact cement do its thing, and we'll be ready to stitch it up. So, you don't need to see me do that. All I'm going to do is stir up the contact cement, take a little piece of a stick, like a piece of a shim like this, and then apply the contact cement and then stick it together. So once that's done, we'll come back and I'll show you how I mark out the edge, clean the edge up with a flat disc, and then mark out the edge with some leather working tools to get a nice even stitch line. Thanks. And don't forget to like and subscribe.